All right. Thank you all for joining us on this last day. Going to try to get everybody awake. If you hadn't had coffee, my job here is to energize. I just had a double espresso, so if I'm a little fast talking, I apologize. So what I want to do today is I want to share a little bit of perspective on innovation from my point of view in looking at cities. And then I want to open it up to discussion to see some of the insights that maybe you've done. And so I want to share a couple of different case studies and sort of some frameworks that helps me when I work and collaborate with cities and we talk about innovation. Let's start here and look at the first case study. Hope the sound will work for us on this one. You got to turn things on, David. There we go.
The motorcycle, and they're just, I don't know, they're just going to hit each other with a car or something. I don't know.
You said trying to hit each other with a car?
Yeah, I'm dealing with the motorcycle. Just sending a police car over here.
US photo right on the DD. It's a white sedan, Hyundai Elantra, and white motorcycle. US one, continuing eastbound on Parkway. Yeah, motorcycle is on the sidewalk.
The white vehicle is continuing eastbound?
All right, there's southbound 4th Avenue from Parkway.
10-4.
All right, westbound G. The sedan is still pursuing the motorcyclist.
Sedan is pursuing the motorcycle. 10-4. Is there any that can brake?
All right, we need a unit code. It looks like the sedan is trying to ram the motorcyclist. They're pulling in behind.
So this was taken out of a recent footage in Chula Vista, California. This was the drone as the first responder. In the U.S., we've had the opportunity to allow drones to fly in a few certain areas of the U.S., and people are trying to explore what are the opportunities for serving our citizens that we can do with new technology. And I think when we talk about smart cities or city innovation, I think what we have to think about is what is the impact and how can we drive new changes with our citizen. And what I found fascinating from this one was the actual... I'll move to here. The actual data that came from this. So we talk about technology. A friend of mine that shared this video with me said it's about the technology, but it's also about the impact. So in the 6-week program that they did, they had 527 calls they responded to. They were on the scene over half of the time. 79 times they did not need to dispatch the fire or the police because the drone could tell them that they did not need it. And the drone was there on average 98 seconds after the emergency was called in. I think we can all look at this and see how this impact is translating immediately into citizen value. And that's what we need to think about when we talk about innovation, I think, in cities and civic innovation. And for me, I think about what we're doing here as a collaboration between industries and cities as putting together the people, the technology, and creating an innovation out of this. And I think the piece for me that's key is we have to continue to go back to the people. What I loved about the drone video that we saw earlier here is it wasn't about the drone technology, it was about 98 seconds was how fast I could respond to when you are in need. I believe there's actually a drone as a first responder in northern Spain that brings for heart attacks. And so they can't get an ambulance there quick enough, and so it will actually fly an emergency pack out to the person having a heart attack. So we talk about cities, and I think I don't need to tell you, but the rapid urbanization has really created us into a peer-to-peer network between individuals and cities. Cities are really where our lives are impacted, where we live, and where we transform. Even in the States, the United States, the states are becoming less and less of the entity we care about. It's more about the different cities, and that's why we are all here. Now, this is a picture of the first electric vehicle. Do you know who drove the first electric vehicle? Mrs. Ford. So the first Ford Model Ts were very difficult to drive, to shift, because they were a manual transmission. You had to shift it. She didn't want it, so he built her an electric car. Very innovative for, I think, 1914 or 1920, but still today we're having struggles getting the electric vehicles in. But transportation is a great place where we've actually done some disruptive technologies that we're now trying to undisrupt. And I'll just share with you some examples. We started off with public transportation where we had a horse-drawn trolley, and then we moved up to an electrified trolley. And then we went into light rail where we said we're going to extend our reach and transport more people efficiently. And then the big disruptor happened, the bus. Now, the bus is something we take for granted today, but the bus was a huge disruptor for the transportation industry because with the bus, we no longer were constrained to the rails that we put down, right? We could go anywhere, we could do anything. This was, I think, from 1955. The idea was we would get rid of the rails, we would put the buses in with no foresight, by the way, of the problems we would cause with emissions in the future. And here's where we are today. So this is a bus station. I think this is, it's out in California, where in the US, we paved over all of the old trolley tracks so the buses could park and drive. And what are we doing today? We're coming back and putting in those same trolley tracks to go back to where we were in 1910. And I think this is a great story because one of the things we realize is the disruptions happen and we don't often know what is going to come out of those. Also, I think one of the conversations that we have here, particularly at the Expo, is what does the future look like? And we need to think about and look in the future. When they put out the bus, they never realized that emissions would be the biggest problem. Right now, transportation puts out more emissions than any other industry out there. It is the #1 polluter for us. And then we talk about, you've seen around here, we've seen micromobility. This is a shuttle out in San Diego where you can actually call it and it will come and get you. And then we've gone to docked bikes, right? And then we went to dockless bikes. And finally, now we have the e-scooters, right? I think the valuation for one of these went to $2 billion in 3 months for the valuation of the micromobility. And this is all of us trying to figure out a better way to do things. People ask me, why does the disruption happen in our markets? And the answer is, because all of you are trying to do a very good job. How many of you are going to go to work tomorrow and say, I'm going to do a worse job than I did yesterday? Anyone? No one, right? Right? So we're continually trying to do a better job, and part of this is coming up with new ideas, and this is going to create change, and this change is going to create a disruption for us. But that is how we change. That is how our cities improve and how we move forward. This is a great chart of the speed at which you are innovating. Back in 1900, it took about 3 or 4 decades for the telephone to get adoption, and you can just see that over time we're getting faster and faster and faster adoption of technology. Why is that? It's because we become frictionless. We used to have to wait for things to be shipped, right? Now everything can be connected virtually, and that's part of the challenge and part of the fun of the work that we do here. So one of the great applications that have come out there has been smart streetlights. A colleague of mine, David Graham in San Diego, likes to talk about the smart streetlights and all the applications we can have with data, with sensors. I was down at the Oracle booth, and they were now using the cameras to look at potholes, road conditions, parking that comes in here. A lot of new opportunities. And the question is, how do we improve our citizens' lives with this new technology and these new capabilities? Do you ever get a little scared that we're going too fast? Did you know that every minute, 127 items, or it's actually every second, 127 items are connected to the internet? In fact, we now have the Internet of the Cow, right? Do you feel like at some point we have to stop putting sensors on everything we do? But I think, I show this as a bit of humor, but we need to think about technology and its rapid pace, but also have a little bit of a realization that maybe sometimes we go too far. I think the Internet of the Cow is a little bit too far for me. So I want to share with you probably the most important idea that I teach at the class at Harvard on innovation, and that's this idea of insight, of understanding value not said by your user. So some of you may have heard my talk before. If you don't know, I have a daughter. Her name is Julia. She's 8. And what I love about kids and innovation is if you go out in Boston and ask a citizen what do they want, the answer is a pothole fixed, or maybe I want my school bus on time, right? They're never going to come to you and say, I want a fully integrated data platform that will be able to seamlessly connect my utility data with my transportation data, with my tax data and my census data. They're not going to tell you that. That's our job. Our job is to envision what the future looks like. But a part of the challenge in innovation is we go and talk to people and we're limited by what they tell us. It's not that we don't want to listen to our citizen. It's that we have to think beyond. We have to understand what is not said. And so the reason why I like children is if you give a child a toy and ask them why it's fun, can they tell you why it's fun? No. But you don't expect them to. So you go ahead and try to figure out what would be fun for them. We're limited often when we talk to people by not doing that extra step and figuring out what it needs to be done. And so I did a master class on innovation, and sometimes we play with Legos because it's fun, keeps us from being bored. And this was a Lego set that we had, and I brought it home and I put it on the counter to share with Julia, and I said, honey, before you play with it, can you tell me why Legos are fun? And she's like, Dad, can I just go play? And I'm like, no, really, seriously, why are these fun? She's like, Dad, it's just fun. It just is. Okay? And I said, okay. Now, that's cute, but then I said to her, I said, what would make this more fun? Now, I want you to take a moment because this is what innovation is all about. I want you to look at this picture, and I want you to think about one thing that would make this more fun. Because I asked Julia the same question. What would make this more fun? Her answer was, I don't know, Dad, but just look at that. Any ideas? So, water, okay. So this is what I put on the counter and asked her if it was more fun. All right, so let's just look at this. Let's have a poll. Is this more fun or is this more fun, right? Number 2, right? Everybody immediately saw it. Julia saw it and said, cool, that's awesome. How many of you saw the shark before? All right, we got a few in the back here. By the way, Australia, you guys from Australia by any chance? I find the Australians are a bit more shark aware than the rest of the world there. But, I mean, I've done this for 1,000 people and maybe 5 have seen the shark, all right? But now that I show it to you, you know that this is more fun. And this is what innovation is about. It's about seeing that opportunity for impacting value on our citizens before they can see it. And in case you don't know why the shark is fun, I wanted to just kind of share that with you. All right, that's why the shark was more fun for Julia that was there. And so it is exactly the same problem looking out on the streets of our cities. Where's the shark? What is it that our cities need, that our citizens need, that they're not able to tell us? And that's really fundamentally what the basic of innovation is all about, is understanding what it is they need that they can't articulate. They may not have the expertise, they may not have the vision that you have to go forward. And that's really what I think our jobs are, is to figure out what the shark is for the next generation. And I just want to tell you a couple stories that really show how innovation is not about technology. We probably got some great technology companies here I've walked through here, but it's about the solutions they provide. So this is Nathan in Chicago. He's a homeless veteran. Now that's a sad story, but we have those in the US. What's striking about Nathan is he has $55,000 in the bank. So when Chicago went out to talk to Nathan and the homeless, figuring out we'll get him a shelter, we'll get him a bed, and they come and find out there's people who have money, and they say, why don't you just get a money and rent an apartment and do these things? And his answer was, because I don't have any ID. I'm homeless. And so Chicago, as many places, I know City Possible has a city key program, have realized that identification is one of the biggest barriers for these citizens. The technology is simple, but the impact is huge. This is Yael from Tel Aviv. This was a great story. She lived in a neighborhood where she was concerned to walk home at night. She felt it was unsafe. How many of you have been someplace that you felt somewhat unsafe to walk home? So is there anybody here from Tel Aviv? Awesome tech, great startups. One of the companies had a brilliant idea. They had an app that they put on their phone, and you'd wear it around your neck, and you'd have the phone facing outward, and if you felt you were in an unsafe situation, you'd hit the button, it'd start recording and would stream to the police live what you're seeing. And it was amazing. In the first 4 weeks of introducing this technology, they learned something very important. Everyone was safe. There was no crime. The issue was not fixing the safety and the crime. The issue was that the citizens did not feel safe. That is a very different solution, but a very important perspective on the people that are there. Boston, where we hail from, New Urban Mechanics, these guys do great work. They started with the pothole, and they said, we're going to do an app. How many of you have had an app or used an app with your city, right? This is the newest thing. We have to do an app. So they did an app, and the app takes a picture of the sidewalk, and they send it in, and they found out people really didn't use it. It wasn't really that important to people. They weren't that interested. Until they did this. They decided that they would have someone take a picture of the person who fixed the road that you complained, and they would text it back to the person. Skyrocket adoption. Why? Because citizens wanted to know that their city was engaged with them. It was the connection with the people that drove the adoption of the technology. Now, Google is not smarter than you, right? We've heard about artificial intelligence. We've heard about data mining, machine learning. So this was a flood in Virginia, and somebody had their GPS for Google, and it was telling them where to go. Where do you think Google sends you in a flood? Into the flooded streets. Why? Because there's no cars there. And this was the biggest problem, is people kept on driving into the flood because they were using Google Maps. So I just want to point out, technology isn't always smarter than you are. Google Maps is great. I just wanted to pick up this one because it's kind of fun with what we have there. All right, my friend and colleague, Miguel Gamino, he leads the City Possible effort. He used to talk to us about moonshots when he was the Chief Technology Officer. And I love this picture because if you've been to the expo, everyone around 5 o'clock gets a little happier, right, grabs a beer, and we start to think about what does the future look like. And I think this is really important because going to the moon or looking well beyond where we are today is something that we have to do. And what's interesting is, when I think about technology in the future, I think about science fiction, and this is a great one. This is from 1958, where they had this crazy idea of robot warehouses. Crazy idea. They didn't even have robots in 1958, yet they've got cartoons. And where are we today? Well, there we are, right? I think there's a person at an Amazon fulfillment center, but I'm actually not sure. I've actually never seen a picture here. But what's funny is our world's been taken over by a Roomba, right? A basic vacuum cleaner is what now drives us from that vision. And I want to take you back to see how vision was then and now, particularly when we talk about science fiction here. So here's one, the Sunrays sedan. How many of you have been involved in a pilot program, right? Do all pilots go perfect? Well, so in this case, this is a beautiful idea, but the initial pilot had a little bit of struggle here. This is not exactly the best one. But if you fast forward to today, what you can do out in San Diego is you can pull up your electric vehicle and it can be charged by a solar recharging station. So they've got maybe not the sun panels on the car, but they've got the solar powered car. But it's all about that future vision, imagining what technology can do for us. And let's see if this video will play for us. I want to share with you you may have remembered this movie. I want to show you this scene and we'll look into this here.
Computer? Computer? Ah. Hello, computer.
Just use the keyboard.
The keyboard? How quaint.
All right, how many of you remember that, right? Star Trek was we could talk into our electronics. Remember the Universal Translator? It blows me away that my phone can speak Mandarin, right? I don't know why it does, but we have our Universal Translator, right? Somebody was walking around with one around their neck, and they just had the earphones in, and it would just do the live translation off the web. So this is where we were. This is a vision. We can talk to computers, and here's where we are today.
Assistant actually calling a real salon to schedule the appointment for you. Let's listen.
So how can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now. Okay, we have a 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's her first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks. Great. Have a great day. Bye.
Isn't that amazing? We've gone from this futuristic idea of talking to computers talking for us. It's this vision that drives where we head. This is not something. Back in Star Trek, they haven't even envisioned this idea of them talking for us, but this is where we are today, and I hope I've redeemed myself in Google's eyes because they do some great stuff. When we talk about vision, though, I want to give you one pause because this is what a lot of leaders do, a lot of mayors do, a lot of CEOs do. So this is traffic in LA. If you're the mayor of LA, do we have LA here? I use them as an example. Good, they're not here, so I can talk about them. So here's traffic, and if you're the mayor of LA, you're saying, look, I want some data, right? So I'm going to get some data, and the data shows that over time, the traffic will go up, right? It goes up and to the right. So what does a leader say? A leader says, you know where the vision is for tomorrow? It's right here, right? I just keep on going up. That is not vision. That's extrapolation, right? You just take where we are today and say, if we continue every day, where will we be? What we want is something entirely different. For instance, maybe we're not going to be driving on roads. We're going to be boring tunnels underneath Los Angeles, riding in electric shuttles that will pop up onto the sidewalk. This is Elon Musk's crazy idea. Whether you like him or hate him, you have to admit that this is a completely different approach to the transportation problem. And that's what we want. We want to have this vision that sees the world entirely different. And that's what we're trying to do here at the Technology and Entrepreneurship Center with our City Innovators program. We're really happy to have the collaboration of City Possible. I want to thank them again for all the support they've done and the events that we do around the world. We're convening 35 cities at Harvard in January. We're doing a deep dive in cybersecurity in San Diego. We're going to be in Sydney in March with city leaders, and so it's a great opportunity. I'll just make my pitch right here. If you're a city leader and you want to get engaged with us, it's all free. Just come up to me afterwards, and you can join our forum and our group that puts together all of the activities. So I want to finish my little bit of talk, and then we can get into a discussion of innovation. I think people overcomplicate innovation. I think that's the biggest problem. If you leave with nothing, just go home and say, I need to get a shark, okay? That's the best message I can share. If you want a framework, I think about innovation as simply insight, what is the shark, plus value, right? The insight is finding out what people don't know and making sure it has value. Now, we have to be careful because we don't want to be incremental. We want to be big. We want to be bold. And so what we need to do is make sure that these ideas are led by vision. Now, the one thing that happens to me is companies come in and say, David, could you come and help our company be more innovative? But could you tell us what the biggest mistake other companies have made so we don't make that? I'm usually talking to the CEO or someone there. And I said, yes, here is the #1 barrier to innovation. How many of you have left a room with the Post-it note still on the wall? Yeah? Okay. What's worse is when you enter a room and the Post-its aren't on your idea and you got to take them all off the wall. This is the biggest barrier to innovation. All of you have amazing ideas, but if we don't have the leadership that takes those ideas and translates them into something actionable, we don't go anywhere. It's very simple. It's not that complicated, but that doesn't mean it's easy. And that's why I love working with people like yourselves, experts in the industry, city leaders, my colleagues here at City Possible, in trying to put forward the leadership. That's really what this expo is all about, is about how do we drive leadership in this topic. So I've given you 20 minutes of my take on innovation, hopefully a little fun. I want to now turn it over to the panel that is going to be talking, and the panel is just look to your left and right. These are the panelists that we're going to have today. I want to hear from you on what are some of the biggest insights or thoughts that you had from your time here. Anybody want to start the conversation? I'm a professor, so I can stand up in front of a class for 90 minutes and have you say nothing. So anybody have, somebody have a revelation or insight that they want to share with us that they had here at the forum? Come on. Yes.
the challenges are the same in our city as it is in other countries. It's all the same.
So he said the challenges are all the same between the cities. It was interesting, yesterday, Carlos Menendez is president at MasterCard, and my boss, Paul Bettina, who's the director of the center, they were having a panel here, and Carlos mentioned, he goes, you know, we're more alike than we are different. And last night he actually shared a statistic. It was about looking at some financial analysis, and they found out that the difference between somebody in New York and Seoul, Korea was 0.2%. 99.8% was the same when they did this financial analysis of two different people in two different businesses. We are more the same than we are different. However, we all have unique challenges. All right, I want to ask, what is the best tech idea you've seen here? The best technology? Somebody must have seen something that they thought was cool. Did you see something? Anybody have an idea for a cool technology they saw? Yes.
Yeah, well, here I saw in Cisco this Med bus, Med Plus bus. It's a bus here, well, in Germany. They have a pilot in 7 cities in Germany, and they have this big bus with collaboration with the public transport, and they have it equipped with medical equipment and so on, and it's for elder people. So they go there in these 7 towns in Germany that don't have like 100% healthcare. And then they go there, and then they have this telemedicine and so on, and everything is equipped with the Cisco intelligence software.
Oh, what, do you work for Cisco?
No.
Just wanted to clarify, in case you're all wondering. We have no plants in the audience. What else? Somebody must have seen something cool. Yes?
I was hearing that in Shenzhen today, they are doing all the service by face recognition. So it's not set up in a shop, it's not set up in a center, it's already all around the street. People is following, recognize it, and they do normal operations like take the bus or shopping just by face recognition, but not by a company, it's by the government directly. I mean, by the institution. That's a different institution.
Yes. So facial recognition. How many of you still type in a password on your phone? I mean, we talk about facial recognition and privacy. I'm really annoyed that I just glance at my phone and it turns on. You know, I get a text message and by the way, it took me 2 months to learn. My wife's like, the text messages don't show up. I can't read them. You'll have to come look at your phone. And I said, no, you can read them. Just look at the phone. I didn't realize that I would just look at the phone and it would do the facial recognition, and we would move from there. A cool technology I saw was Julie Snell. We did an event in Dublin on 5G, was talking about their safety pilot. They have a river downtown, and for some reason, due to historical reasons, there's no railing around the river. So people drink in England. I don't know if you knew that. They do. So it turns out the problem is they're in the pubs, and then they walk over near the river, and either accidentally or deliberately they end up in the water. And so what they do is there's a big concern about privacy, and I think Europe really is leading the discussion on privacy. It's very odd. I want to let you know in the States, we're all talking about what we should do for privacy, and then we're finally like, why don't we just do GDPR, right? Why don't we just follow? I think Europe really has taken a lead in setting a standard for that. So I want to thank everyone here for showing us over in the States that it doesn't really need to be that complicated. So what does this have to do? This has to do with the drunk people falling in, because we cannot take cameras in Europe and recognize people. We can't identify people. So what do? It's pretty simple. They have an infrared camera. All it does is see a body, hopefully alive, and it can see its movements. And I didn't know this about GDPR. As soon as the person falls in the water, you have an override, and you can do all the recognition that you need to because there's a life-saving incident. So they actually have artificial intelligence, sees when the person falls in, turn off the infrared camera, they turn on a high-definition video camera that is immediately able to see the person. And I thought that was a clever use of technology, and while looking at privacy as a big concern. Yes?
I'm sorry, I have kind of a fundamental problem with that. What is the cost of the city to prevent the people from falling off the river versus rescuing the person?
So his comment is why do you let them fall in anyway, right? Why do you have to do the rescue? I 100% agree. Because of the history of their city, that this particular river does not have a big barrier. And what they also found is the drunk people will climb over the barrier anyway. So I also heard a great technology. This was very cool. Las Vegas. So Las Vegas, they paid $6 million to put up a Las Vegas sign that was in the shape of a dancer, showgirl that was there. And so the question was, okay, this is great. The mayor was very proud. $6 million. How many of you think $6 million for signs is quite a bit of money? How many of you would like $6 million for your next smart city pilot, right? You just need to get a sign, okay? That's your problem. You just put the wrong line in the budget there. So they get the sign, and what they also have in Las Vegas is they also have cameras. And so they're doing a lot on surveillance as a way to reduce the load on police. Basically to see if there's a way where they can respond to a situation, understand a situation before the police are there. And what they came to find was people, they drank in Las Vegas too. They would get drunk and they would climb on the sign. They would go to the bathroom on the sign. And so the mayor was really upset that $6 million sign was being treated this way. And the way they were able to capture the interest of their mayor on surveillance and the technology was they put up a camera so the police could now talk to people and say, get off the sign. I asked you before, please get off the sign. And it turns out, from what I understand, is they'll tell them 3 times, and then they'll say, all right, we're sending out a police officer, said you didn't get off the sign. But you know, it's an interesting way of how the technology creeps into our lives. What other technology have you seen that you think might be interesting and pervasive here?
Toronto, Google and Sidewalks are creating a city in a harbor in Toronto. And it's very amazing because they are going to measure all the interactions of the people living in the city. And then they will create like a better project to really integrate and develop all the necessities of these people living in the city. And I think that it's going to be like a very dramatic evolution in the way that people create and design cities. So I think that it's very cool for Google that they are like creating this engagement with the behavior of the people living in the city.
Right. How many of you know the story in Toronto? Sidewalk Labs came in, right? So they've had a real setback in their piece because they announced they were going to put sensors in and measure people, and they didn't talk to the citizens about it. Now, what I think is funny is Google is already monitoring everything you do. Do you know where the data for Google Maps comes from? It comes from you carrying around a GPS telling Google where you are all the time. So Google already knows this. So what's funny is Google just told us that they are going to do it instead of not telling us they're doing this. But I think the privacy issue is very important. That's why I like this example from Bristol, because I think it finds a clever solution to this. But we were just talking down at, I think this was the Oracle booth. We were chatting with them, and they actually said something I think is pretty interesting. I showed you that example of Boston and their app. A lot of cities have 311s where you can take a picture of a pothole and send it in and be repaired. And they pointed out, I think it was Albuquerque they were talking to in the US, said it's not our citizens' job to tell us the roads are bad. So they're putting cameras on all of the trash trucks and they'll just scan the roads every day and they'll get a complete report of the road conditions and to go out and fix. And I actually think, to your point, I think there's a lot of opportunity for our cities to start to self-monitor and understand where we do. What about mobility? How many of you think mobility is an opportunity for us to really transform our cities? Anybody? Anybody? Okay. Any of you ride electric scooters? Yeah? Okay. So I just confirmed it today. You cannot ride an electric scooter in the snow. Somebody tried it in Boston. I didn't try it, but he said, yeah, it doesn't work. So it doesn't go everywhere. But mobility is this area where we talk about data and the integration of the platform. It's interesting because you come to Europe from the US, I go to London, and it will take me from where I am to wherever I want on Google with the exact timetables of all the transportations, every mode I can do. We don't have that in the US yet. But that's an opportunity where our lives really improve. Another thing I heard here at the Expo that I thought was interesting was they wanted to start monitoring with your cell phones where the traffic was going and understand the traffic patterns, because right now, the subway system is fixed, right? And they just assume that they built it right. How many of you think they built the subway exactly where it should have been, right? Probably not. And so they're starting to look at what are the options and where are people going and how can I reroute that? How can I be more intelligent and more efficient for that? I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think if we can solve some of these privacy issues, the ability for our cities to help us without us knowing are there. Does anybody know what started the Internet of Things? IoT. Yes? Oh. Okay. No? Okay. So it started with lipstick. Yes, it did. So Kevin Ashton was working in the Media Lab at MIT, and they were doing inventory. And he had this idea of what if people didn't have to collect data? This was the big vision. The big change for the Internet of Things was we're going to stop having people have to go out and get the data, and we're going to have objects simply collect the data for us. And the first Internet of Things sensor was an inventory for a lipstick aisle in one of their test showcases. And it was sort of this change of the data will come. And I think that's one of the most powerful pieces when we talk about information and these sensors is that the data will come in automatically and our lives can be improved. We can figure out what that shark is before it happens. All right, we've talked about a lot of technology, a lot of cool things. What about challenges? What do you see are some of the biggest challenges we still have? What should we be working on? I know you have a challenge, don't you?
I'm sorry. My challenge is very superficial, formal, and naive. I'm so sorry to bring this out, but I worked with a firm of architecture and design in Milan, and I see no design guidelines whatsoever to be respected. So I see the cities, there is a great potential for technology to transform the cities, but in my mind and in my heart, I would hope this will bring to a more beautiful cities and not to, I'm gonna say, the playground effect in terms of objectifications of technology, disproportions, massive steel infrastructures or so. I support innovation. I know this is all experimental and it is all created for the good of all, but I hope a little bit of guidelines and aesthetics will come in at a certain point and that we will redo our cities as beautiful places and especially be able to enjoy them visually for a long time.
So who thinks the beauty of our cities is superficial? No, I think this is very important. Yes?
No, it's not, but maybe there is another one that is even worse, which is aging population. How do we have to define infrastructure in the future for places like Japan or even Europe, where there is a lot of people that are going to be probably with Alzheimer and lost in a city that is not friendly to them?
So my belief is that technology will enable more equity and more access for everyone. And I think we have to go from that paradigm of, so for instance, we talk about the elderly. One of the projects in my scientific research that we're working on is a self-powered EKG monitor that they can wear on their shirt. And we have a little box that sits on the shelf, and they can now not be in a hospital, and they can walk around their own apartment, and they can be completely monitored without having to have that. So it gives them more access, more freedom. Back to your point, the CIO of Washington, D.C. said something that was very, I think, very clever to me about Uber, right? Uber's a bit of a disruptor. They've been turned off here. I know that if you've waited, how many of you waited for a taxi for over 20 minutes at some point? Yeah, okay. So they could turn it back on just for this expo, and then they could turn it back off maybe tomorrow. That would have been okay. So she said the problem with Uber is not that they're a disruptor. The problem is that the city didn't lead Uber. That what the city should have done is the city should have driven a vision for what mobility would look like in the future. It was the reactive component that made Uber disruptive. It wasn't the idea and the technology. And I always think about that because you were talking about the beauty of our city. We have to think about, the reason you need to have the vision is you need to set a more beautiful world for tomorrow and put in the policies and the infrastructure to make that happen. It's our job to have that vision and build in the fact that we're going to have change and we're going to have this disruption that comes. And you talk about beauty, one of the big concerns in Melbourne is the attractiveness of the cityscape with 5G coming in. And so they actually are using virtual reality to show what the city would look like with the infrastructure that is there. All right, any other challenges that anyone wants to share? What, you have a challenge? Yep.
Okay. Well, I think there are two big that englobe, well, is a group of all that is sustainability and inclusivity. And below there, below there is all of the other things that is pollution, is circular economy, and all of the other solutions that are in between these two topics, sustainability, that for me is the two challenges, and inclusivity.
Inclusivity and sustainability. Awesome. That's great. Do we have any? Yes.
Mine was sold by her.
She took your idea?
Told by her.
Took your idea. It was a good idea. It's a good idea. I should take it. Do we have any questions? Before we wrap up, I want to see if we have any questions. Yes. Yes, sir.
Hi. For me, it was more of a social economic gap. Poverty is a big issue here. As long as technology goes, you see that a lot of working and jobs are going to be taken by machines. And that's kind of how I envision that what could be a potential solution through education to narrow that gap.
Thank you for being here. Going back to the architecture, what's going on in the construction industry? That's an industry that, I mean, if you go around, there's not technology, and without construction, there's no cities, right? So can you tell us about?
So he made the point of we're all experts together talking about everybody who's in the room, but who's not in the room. And so construction is one of the big pieces of building the infrastructures of our cities. It's interesting because construction hasn't, in some senses it has advanced, but we're still building concrete buildings. We're still building with steel. To his point, one of the things Google's trying to do up in Sidewalk Labs is they're trying to demonstrate they can build a 10-story building all of wood, and then they can meet all the fire codes with it. So they're looking for more sustainable ways to do that. But I think, to me, my biggest answer is, wow, I think we really need to think about who's not here, and that is one of the biggest, well, the biggest infrastructure builders that we have are obviously the construction companies. And concrete is not good for the earth. But leave the trees where they are. Yes?
I believe Bill Gates is working on something on lower footprint.
Right. Lower footprint concrete. And I just want to comment on where we are today. So how many of you grew up and your parents kept on yelling at you to turn the lights off? Right? Okay. My daughter leaves the lights on, and I tell her to turn it off, but I realize my entire house costs less than that one light bulb I had as a kid. So we really are making a journey forward. I think that the biggest leap is if we can move from fossil fuels for transportation, and we just really need to get past that pivot point for electric vehicles. And they've come a long way, and I'm just hoping we can move past that and forward. Any other questions, comments? Yes?
So what's the solution for a scenario where water level rises, for example? I mean, how can you solve moving a city, because it's not going to be viable in the future?
So Melbourne has this problem of they get large flooding, and what surprised me is it goes, and yes, Venice knew it had a water problem a long time ago. But I didn't realize that the flooding happens so far upriver. So what they're doing down there is they now have a complete 3D model of what the floods look like. And they're now going out to all of the buildings and saying, this is what the 100-year flood, the 500-year flood, this is where they are. And they're making them now take remediation to figure out what is there. They all have to have a flood plan. And so they have to establish what they're doing for the flooding. But with climate change, yes, I mean, emissions is the biggest one, I think, that we could probably make a difference on in our cities. But that's a challenge because it's such a long delay between your action and the return on there. And those are the hardest. It's easiest to change something when I fix it today and I see it improved tomorrow. That's the easiest one to do. And it's hard to go those long times. Other comments or questions about today? Yes.
Hi. So this whole few days, there's lots of conversations about cities. How are we going to start to address the increasing disconnect between our urban environment and our rural environment so that we don't leave them behind as we're developing?
I think it's a great point because most of the conversations we have are in cities, with cities, and people who live in cities. I live in the suburbs. I don't live in a city. I did live in Boston for many. I lived on a boat in Boston because I couldn't afford an apartment and a boat, and you have to have priorities. So, and yes, it is cold in the winter. But I think you make an important point because we talk about cities. I think that's almost a little bit of a legacy word because it's really a metropolitan area. Because if you go to like San Francisco, like San Jose isn't a big city, but it's a big metropolitan area. And how do we keep that inclusive going? I will tell you one bright spot. So we were talking about 5G. And one of the benefits 5G is going to have for all of you is if you ever had poor reception in a city, all the little waves bouncing off the buildings make it hard for your cell phone. Well, the brilliant engineers now use all the bouncing off the buildings to actually give you faster data rates. So with new technology and ideas, they're actually going faster, and the buildings are your friend. But you go out into the rural areas, and I'm thinking, are we going to put all these small cell towers? We're going to have 5G everywhere? And I said, no. And somebody said, of course we are, David. And I said, what do you mean? Because 5G will have the bandwidth of low-speed fiber. But what we can do now is we've gone from the paradigm of the towers, the big cell towers. The new 5G stations are going to be that big. And so what I'm learning is what they're doing for farms is they will actually go out and put a $5,000 mini station on a pole that will service the entire farm. One of the big things in agriculture is getting to autonomous vehicles for performing farming. And this is a way for them to communicate. And I never really thought about it as being an option for including, but it really does now solve a connectivity problem. Also, it's an option for inclusivity in cities. We always talk about the digital divide. It's kind of interesting, but now we have the ability with the speed to put wireless networks anywhere, and the cost of the infrastructure is becoming so low that we can really build out neighborhoods that never had the connectivity before. It's a great question. Other questions? Ideas? Yes.
Thank you for being here. I have a solution for you about Uber.
Yes.
Right? There's an app called Cabify, right? Cabify, an app, and then it's like Uber, but it's from here.
Right.
The question: shouldn't we worry about radiation from 5Gs, 4Gs? You know, all those.
It's a great question. Shouldn't we worry about radiation from 5G? I'm going to put on my PhD for 4G, 3D. I'm going to put on my PhD hat. No. So we actually take real models of real people, not live people, but we do complete, thorough modeling and testing of the impact of the radio waves. What happened way back when cell phones came is no one looked at it. And after people said we really should, some of the first cell phones were a little bit unsafe. The radiation that's coming out of these little tower is the same radiation that used to come out of the big old first 1G cell phones. So we're actually going in lower power, becoming a safer environment. We are increasing in frequency, but there hasn't been anything to show that that is causing a danger. However, I will comment to you, we wrote a grant to the National Science Foundation, and we had to have a colleague come in who was going to talk about the health effects of our technology. And I said, this is your area of research? He says, yes. Society always is afraid of new technology. It's a constant problem. Whenever anything new comes out, we ask, is it safe for us? And I think that's a really important question. Wireless power, is anybody concerned about, by the way, there's more danger from the wireless power charging your phone than there is from the cell phone signal that's going on. Is anybody worried about, you know, the wireless power chat pad next to their bed? No. It turns out it is safe. You can put your hand on it. Your hand might get a little warm, but other than that, you'll be just fine there. Any last burning questions? I want to make sure I don't overstate my time. By the way, he mentioned he mentioned Cabify. So as far as I can tell, Cabify is an app that last night would tell me that a cab's going to come in 15 minutes and then would cancel right before the 15 minutes is up. That's my experience with Cabify. Yes, sir.
I didn't say they were efficient.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
I didn't say they were efficient.
Efficient, yeah.
One question: are you optimistic about our future? You know, humankind, cities, with the climate change. Is innovation the solution to everything?
Well, let's see. I'm an expert in innovation. So yes, innovation is the solution to everything. I think as a race, I mean, what are we here for? I mean, there's really, I think, fundamentally two things. We're here for each other, and we're here to create something new and more beautiful for tomorrow. And really, that's where innovation is trying to figure out how we can create something more amazing for the future. Sometimes, many times we get it wrong. The bus is a great example that's there. I do have concerns that our environment may get to a point where our freedom and ability to live as we have, but I think we will eventually overcome that. I've heard some amazing stories of reforestation. There now is a drone that will plant 140 trees per minute. And, one of the ideas is, how can we go plant, 1 billion new trees? And so I think it's a concern, but I think it's just us trying to do better that leads to these changes, and we're constantly changing. Every generation is new. By the way, it turns out that the younger generation is not lazier than we are, because there was an article that somebody wrote in the 50s talking about how we were lazier than our parents were. It's just the perspective. We work hard all of our life, and we look back. So I think we're continually changing. We're continually trying to do better. We're trying to amaze ourselves, our families, our citizens. And I just want to leave you, go out and find your shark. That's what we want to do. Find out how you can add value to your company, to your citizens. And if you'd like to connect with me and the work we're doing here at Harvard, come down afterwards and we can have that conversation. Thank you all for joining.